you so much for coming meet us today. It's a pleasure, and we're a select group, and very interesting people, so it's a pleasure to be with you. We're very thankful to Alexis to join us. Alexis is with TCS, one of the biggest tech organizations in the world, so it's really cool to be able to bring him to share his experience with us. He's done more than 300 deals in tech, and he knows a lot about software due diligence, and he'll be sharing his experience with us. We'll talk a little bit about what we do as well, and I'll let Camilla get us started.
Thank you so much for coming. If you don't have a name tag, just hire me and I'll get a name tag for you. The idea is I will do a presentation, a prior chat with Alexis, and then go to networking events and drinks. So hopefully it will be a good way to connect with different people and different companies. We are a Swiss-based company, and our focus is software due diligence. So in essence, we don't have a software that does due diligence. We do due diligence on software, and we are a service company. Brand new in the UK, but we have a very big track record. We've worked with companies such as Stepstone, Via Equity, XP, banks, institutions, and whatnot, either on the pre-deal, during due diligence processes, and PMIs, first 100 days of value creation. So we'll go through a little bit of a concept of what is software construction and development, and Alexis will talk through his experience and some use cases. Thank you so much.
All right, Alexis, so if you want to talk about TCS a little bit, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So I'm sure you've pretty much heard of the Tata Group, and it's Tata Steel, Jaguar Land Rover, and of course Tata Consulting Services. Roughly about 615,000 people, I've been told. In my previous job, I remember we were 45,000 people worldwide, and I thought, gosh, that's a lot of people. And then I realized at TCS there must be a turnover of about 150,000 people a year, and they still must be hiring about 200 to carry on with that growth story. Has been a rather amazing growth story at TCS. I think in the last 20 years, I met someone who had just done 20 years, and they said they were employee 69. So I was just like, wow, so 600,000, wow. So I've just been there for 3 years. Obviously with the COVID lockdown, I didn't get a chance yet to go to India, but I've been told we've got a huge campus in Mumbai and Chennai as well. And we do service all the sort of big blue chip companies. Everyone assumes that that's all we do, though. We do a lot with smaller companies. We have a co-investment network. We do quite a bit with private equity as well, and we do support mid-cap businesses. So we do actually the full range. It's not just the big players out there, the big multinationals. Okay, right. Well, something about tech due diligence, and I hope you can see this slide all right. So when I first started M&A, which I think my first deal was JP Morgan Chase coming together. But when I first started doing due diligence, it was very much the left-hand side. And I think some of you can probably remember, all these on-premise little databases and code, and everyone was using Microsoft Access little applications and trying to do that. So, and I used to have to go to a lawyer's data room. There wasn't an online data room. I'd actually have to go and get a folder, photocopy stuff, and then go back to my office and write up my findings. So that's what it's like. But the world's definitely moved on, and some really sort of sexy stuff has come about. Not just the internet, but obviously AI and blockchain and machine learning. And we've seen a massive sort of step shift where it's not IT anymore, it's tech, it's digital, and it's a revenue maker. It's not a cost line, just a cost line anymore. And you're getting a lot of companies that are saying, Alexis, tell me what the technical debt is on this business. How much of a code rewrite have I really got to do? Because to me, this is a bit of a black box, or this is a bit of a time bomb. So as you probably know, that SAP, one of the most successful software companies, it's actually written in its own code, ABAP, most ERP software companies have written in their own code. You wouldn't dream of doing that anymore. Okay, so technical debt can cover a lot of things. It can cover not just the code, but the infrastructure, the people, the key dependencies that you may have. And also you want to benchmark the business as well. One play that TCS and other outsourcers can do, they can provide a lot of augmentation resource. So suddenly you want to get into other regions, other areas, or you want to step up on a big project, then you would go to a third-party provider, and suddenly you got this sort of labor arbitrage win where, adding another 100 developers is not actually going to cost you an arm and a leg, particularly if you're based in Northern Europe. And you still get the quality and you get the management and some of the best practices coming through. So I like to think. Anyway, in terms of how do people want to consume a tech due diligence, the truth is when you're talking about a database, most people do switch off a little bit. But in reality, all of these things under high volumes can lock, and the code can lock as well. But the presentation of the findings, the thinking, the way private equity investors and corporate people want to consume that data is really quite different. So there is a knowing your audience as a provider, as a service provider, but also if you're a buyer, it is worth telling your provider as well what you're really after. And a lot of people will say, I really want you to focus on this area. I know I just want red flags on this bit. Just give me a basic table, tell me the red flags. If it's going to be a big deal, then we'll do a deep dive, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, you've also got to prepare that sort of information for your investment committee, or you've got to prepare it for a board decision, or you've got to present it to your IT department who don't know anything about these guys yet, saying, hey, we bought an insure tech, or we bought a biotech business, and you guys have got to assimilate them into our business without destroying value. I think the big difference, though, coming back is understanding value, and not just the enterprise value of the business, but what the value is to you as a buyer of this business, what you're going to do. You are thinking in the Peter Thiel 0 to 1 world. In 5 years, in 10 years, where am I going to go with this company? I'm not just doing the deal and sitting on it. I'm actually going to do something with it that's going to create additional value with this company. The process. Processes, you have to be careful. I know there's some entrepreneurs here. So when you go to court an entrepreneur, they want to actually see that you're passionate and interested, and you're going to look after their baby that they've been building. And you're not going to tear it apart or add 20 other companies to it and completely lose their souls. So there's a little bit about courting. And then when you bring in a due diligence provider, due diligence can be very pointed. It's actually quite a scary affair for someone to be interrogated about every part of their business. It is a bit bearing your soul and some of the skeletons in your cupboard. There were some years where perhaps you had to take some shortcuts to make certain things happen. And depending on how mature your business, there may be a lot of legacy stuff that ultimately is going to hit your wallet, because it's going to be seen as technical debt. It's going to go into the enterprise valuation. And so sellers might not be that forthcoming with all the data. So having a specialist provider who knows the industry, who knows that sort of type of technology is a good thing. And even if you do go to a well-known established provider, whether it's Big Four, Strategy, it is actually almost worth talking to the team a little bit to discern who's really got the knowledge and skill set in their team. You're not just buying the brand, but you're buying the team. In terms of process, I mean, typically there's information requests, there's an assessment of the documentation, then you get the interviews, and then if you're in an auction process, then you might not get through the first round, and hopefully you do. Then you have to put in your first round bid, your second round bid, and then you get deeper dive DDs. And then of course, just before signing, there's disclosures, and you might get in and you might find some more things that take a chip on the enterprise value. Then there's a bit of final negotiation, and you're out. And these things will stagger along that process. The reporting on due diligence staggers. So you might start with a red flags report. Then it's a sort of deeper dive to appease the banks for the lending. And then after that, it may be an internal deep dive. We've bought the business. Alexis, team, go and speak to the management team, tell them what they need to remediate and help us out with a day 100 plan here. But feel free to ask any questions. Is that fair, Rodney? People can ask any questions if you want as we go along.
I think it's a nice segue because we can kind of contrast, and TCS is as big as it gets, and we're very niche and boutique, and everyone is very technical. So the way we do it is we take the investment thesis, and then we have a methodology that goes products, processes, and people. And what we do is we've developed technology that moves in to the target infrastructure, stays there under their control, the data is with them. But instead of flooding them with lots of questionnaires and lots of interviews and things like that, we actually pull all the data and we do the analytics on the data before we start discussing with them. And that shortens the time that we can go very deep in specific areas of pain. So we do in weeks what would usually take months of work to find out. And that's because of the software, the AI, ChatGPT makes it very easy to understand. With all this data, it's the team of experts, and it's exactly what Alexis was saying is like, we only work with senior people. So the average experience in our team of experts is 25 years of experience, all former C-level. So because we don't have to do manual work to collect the information, it comes through the software, then the senior team can immediately go deep and investigate, and then define at a high level, okay, what are the action plan, what are the actions that need to be taken. We don't do the follow-up, so different from Tata that has a lot of people and has a lot of resources to go follow through. We actually advise and say, so on the other hand, we're very independent. We're not, we have no vested interest whatsoever. It's really what's important for the business, what do we recommend. And that's also part of the partnership because they have the manpower to go and implement.
I think one thing, Rodney and Camilla were impressing on me, and I did think about it is there's certain things that are sort of quite tangible. You go into a data center, you can see their setup. You go into their office, you can see their setup. But when people are talking about their platform, it's a bit of a black box. It spits out something, you assume it works, but you don't realize, if I wanted to scale this, is it really going to work? Okay, they say they're on the cloud, they got all the optimum configurations. The CTO or CDO talks a damn good game, but I can't really see. And I think companies like Cavalia that can come in and actually tell you really what the technical debt is on the code, until you got a 50% rewrite, it's going to take you a year and a half, or can tell you, by the way, there's some nice upside here. You can scale this, and this is how I'd go about it, and I'd improve their governance structure in doing that and augment their team in these areas. I think that's really powerful. And as a buyer, you really do need to know that. You don't want to go with your eyes closed in that sort of occasion or instance.
And, again, this is brilliant segue to the next point, which is, we have a lot of business people here that perhaps are not totally familiar with how software development works. So I just brought a simplified version of a process, and I just want to walk everyone through it, because then we go through a case very quickly, and you can start understanding how we connect data with expertise, and then say, okay, what do you take from that, right? So when you talk about software, of course, it starts from ideas. Oh, we're going to automate something, or we're going to standardize the process, or anything like that. But if you have a software running, you also have bugs. So people are complaining, this doesn't work, it's too slow, it's crashing. Whatever it is, that's coming through to the company as well. And with the pressure to deliver the fixes, the new features, scale the number of users, whatever it is that is pressuring the business, sometimes there'll be shortcuts. And when you take a shortcut, you need to come back and improve that piece of software later. And this shortcut has many forms, right? But basically, if you think about building and if you're constructing a building and you don't know if you need 20 floors or not, and you only have money to build for 5 floors, you build the foundations and start selling and say, oh, it could be actually 50 floors. But you have to go back to the foundations. The problem, because it's an intangible and you can't see, well, it's easy to commercially put pressure and just build on top of it, right? In software development, you've got these areas that will fit into a roadmap. So we say, okay, look, there's a planning, and there are all sorts of people. There'll be a business analyst looking at what needs to be done and what's the market. Then there'll be a product owner that will say, okay, we see that, and we'll make a plan for the roadmap. What are the fixes? What are urgent? What not? What are the technical improvements we're going to do? What we're going to leave for later? And what are the features we're going to launch? That gets broken down in this agile world into jargon words, right? Like epics. Epics is just a big chunk of work that gets broken down into what they call stories. And a story is a small chunk of work that you're supposed to finish in a sprint. And a sprint is a 2-week work. So you make a plan and you say, okay, in these 2 weeks, we work together in these pieces. So let's imagine I want to do a web shop. A web shop is an epic. But now I just want the front page and being able to log in. So these are 2 stories. And we're going to do these 2 bits in 2 weeks. It's not the whole shop, but it's finished. And I start progressing and building my software, right? So that's one way to do it. It's not the only way, but it's one way. And sometimes you have bugs to fix and other tasks and so on. You move into the software development, you move into the sprint, people work for 2 weeks, they produce the software. Software is not only code, it's tests, it's documentation. Otherwise, everything is in the heads of the people. It's all tacit knowledge. If you don't document, you don't really have an asset. People are the asset. For software to become the asset, you have to have it properly documented with test automation. And that's really hard to understand because the business thinks, oh, that's just overhead. In the beginning, yes, but when you succeed, that's what makes it an asset. Otherwise, it's just code that the next guy will have to read and try to understand again because it makes no sense. It's like reinventing the wheel every time.
I just want to sort of add to that. So, on the building side, what you see is underneath the hood sometimes, people actually replicate the system and then connect the two with a data layer. And you're saying, oh, so what you're really telling me is you can't really scale your system. You're having to replicate. And they go, but that works. I said, well, maybe it does, but it becomes a problem when I want to really load it up. You're not going to be able to do that very quickly. And then on the sprints and the way they're doing that, there are certain metrics and benchmarks you can use. You can look at their defect log, how many defects are they getting out, etc. When you're talking to the customers, you can see the customer calls and the number of issues that they've raised. And also, I always think it's really important because all this sort of product tech in some way is front-facing, is that customer experience that they're getting. And they should be, as we talk about sort of DevOps, which is what you're kind of explaining there, and is that they should be doing that with a sort of customer view all the time. That's the whole idea of this agile, the sprint working, is that they incorporate those requirements. They're thinking always about the end user of this and building that in before it's too late when they get to the final code.
Exactly. So then you get to integrate that into the software that was there before, and now they need to work together, and that is not always easy. So if it's automated, it's easy. If it's all manual, it's hard. And then it's finally done. It's released. Now you can have ChatGPT Plus, and it's a paid service, and it's available. And then you got happy users, hopefully, and some angry ones creating new bugs, and the cycle continues. So you have this train of people trying to understand what they should do, what they shouldn't, prioritizing that on the roadmap. And one of the things that we need to understand is that if you just look at the code, you miss the whole picture. And the business value is here. It's what Alexis was saying. The people using it and paying for it and finding value in it. So if you don't take the whole picture into account, if you don't look at the product, the processes, and the people doing it, you only get part of the story. And I think there's a nice little case here. And this is a follow-on investment. It's actually an acquisition. A strategic investor put money on a startup, was doing well, and did the first round. They doubled their team. And the hypothesis was, okay, you have a certain speed of development that you see on the white line. And they projected, previous to the investment, they projected a certain speed of development, new features. So you see them accumulating in purple, right? And they pile up as they get delivered. Remember the stories and the bugs and the tasks, they pile up and they say, oh, this is what we're shipping. We're delivering, it's getting done. But what happened is because of the due diligence process consuming a lot of time through, questionnaires and meetings and all of that, plus they had to hire people, so all the interviews and the recruitment and onboarding, they basically lost a quarter of their development. So you see that nothing piles up during Q4. It's just flat, and the new features being shipped. And that's when management starts getting really angry. It's like, oh, we have more people, but we seem to be slower. What's happening? Yeah, you actually not shipping. You can see that in the data. You can see that in the metric. Then they onboard all these people, they start producing, and lo and behold, they have the same speed as before. So now you have twice the cost, and you're shipping the exact same thing you were before, and you lost a quarter in between. But in your projections, as an investor, you thought, okay, I'm putting more money, they got more people, they're going this speed, now they're gonna go faster. That's the red dotted line, going even faster. So what happens is management came to us and said, look, we have this to-do list that's huge, and these guys were supposed to be delivering, and they're not. So we're not sure if we should buy this company anymore because we put money on them, and what are they doing? Should we acquire them? So we go in and we get the data, and then we discover that actually, remember the prioritization process? They put one of their guys as a strategic investor in the company. And this guy's job was to say that everything was a priority. When everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. And then you look at work in progress. These are the things that they're working, trying to finish to ship. It explodes. It's the line in the middle here. So you double the team, but you have 6 times the number of things that start and stop and they don't get shipped, and it's chaos. So the strategic investor, by being heavy-handed in the operation, actually made a dysfunctional team. They hindered the performance of this team, and they didn't even know. They thought we're being hard-nosed, we're pushing through, but they're making these guys' lives harder. When we look at cycle time, and cycle time is that period when they start the sprint and they're going to ship. And here we do a quartile distribution. It's a little bit technical, but it's not hard. And the number 18 is what 75% of things get done in up to 18 days, which is roughly 2 weeks. And usually these sprints, you put 20 to 30% more than you can do on the OKR. So you're pushing people to see if they can deliver more. So that's pretty good. They had a pretty good running company. That's why they attracted the first investment in the first place. But then, you got the due diligence, the onboarding process, and now the lack of prioritization. And these guys, instead of shipping in 2 weeks, they're shipping in 2 months. And again, we're seeing this in the data because they register. That's the story. Start doing the story. It goes back and forth, doesn't finish. It gets completed in 2 months now instead of 2 weeks. Now you look at the code base. And what's interesting is we find a new product is being developed by a small group of very senior developers. And then we go and ask them and say, what's going on? What's this product? And ultimately, the answer is, we don't know if we're going to get the follow-on investment because we have a lot of conflict in the board because we're not delivering and we have this big to-do list that we can't deliver. So we're afraid we're going to not have the acquisition, and we're creating a new product in case we need to raise a new round. But the problem is these guys, they're not many, but they're the guys that know everything. They're the go-to people. So you onboard a bunch of people, they don't know what to do. They want to go talk to Alexis. Oh, Alexis can do, he's doing, the submarine project. And now it takes long to do. So this lack of communication and the strategy, the misalignment in the strategy is reflected in the data. And it's not an opinion, it's a fact. And then it's how do you explain the fact? And it becomes a lot more constructive or destructive. In this case, these guys had a valuation of about $100 million. Because they were so slow, the projection of actually delivering this product to new verticals got pushed out. They said they can't deliver what they promised. The products are not going to be there for at least 6 to 9 months. That pushed the whole revenue growth downstream, and the exit period and the business plan, the curve gets cut off earlier. And that's, a 43 million loss in value. Okay, they make less money, they pay less tax, so you recover some of the tax. But in the end, you lost almost 30% of this company value because of misalignment between strategy and execution in the code. And that's not something even management would be able to say, because if you don't pull the data, you don't know. You have a feeling, but you can't really precisely say that's what's going on. So I think that's a cool kind of warm-up case for us to discuss, and Alexis will have hundreds of them to talk.
No, but I think there's some. It's very interesting that, and also when I saw it when I was working for a private equity firm, and they were looking to buy a software business, and to be honest with you, the financial numbers were good, but they had a very big project with a public sector body. And they were running behind time for some of the reasons that you had, because they had to scale up the team very quickly. They were taking a sort of unknown quantity of quality of resource in order to do that. They had a tricky client who really didn't know what they wanted. And I said, watch out for that project. They might lose the whole thing. And a lot of their numbers are predicated on this big software development that they're doing as part for this public sector organization. And of course, the public sector are notorious at backtracking a little bit about what they wanted. So if you don't have that agile approach, you don't have that notorious, you can lose a lot of value. And in fact, in the end, unfortunately, the private equity firm did lose their shirt. They had to sell that firm at a much bigger discount on their exit. But I think they were pleased to be rid of it. The other thing is do have a strong look at the management team and the governance of that. Do look at their track record of what they've achieved. They can be very smooth talkers, but sometimes the stats, if you can go in, not just the financial stats, but go into the actual metrics of what they do and how they do it. And sometimes putting in a new CTO that has a fresh way of thinking, knows what good looks like, and can be a good motivator, has a sort of general charisma about him that can help motivate teams and people to get things done, can really make a massive difference. So it's quite key there. I think it's also I went to Norway and I saw a sort of mid-cap. Well, it's quite a big company now, and I went to see the CEO and I said, look, we've got some performance areas optimization areas that you might be interested in, and we talked about a number of things, because when you buy another software company, so you might want to put two together, how do you actually make sure that you don't upset all the customers on the existing products, but you run an economical ship? So you're not running 100 products, you're actually sunsetting quite a few of them and merging them into your new releases. And he actually came up with some tricks of the trade. He said, well, don't rebadge your products, and you can slowly add on and augment to the products that you've bought with some digital products. And then as new releases come in, add to it. Don't just bin their products and say, this is the new product. That's a sure way of losing your customer base. But I can assure you there's a lot of software companies that have done that and then absolutely destroyed about a third or 50% of the value of the business that they've bought, thinking that they're buying that customer base with those products, and they'll just push them onto their products. So actually, you've got to be quite subtle about it, be quite smart. Remember, the branding for the local market is very important. I actually, my building, we're in between offices, and I'm sitting in a WeWork office actually at the moment, and it's interesting that one of them in that there's a company in that building that I used to work with, and they've taken an ethos that I never thought I would see. I don't know if you ever remember the old days when Anderson Consulting were doing a present. They had that TV advert, and it was a shoal of fish, and the shoulder fish takes the shape of a shark and can swim on and protects itself in that way. And I thought this company was doing, it was a software company, but doing very much the same thing, where the back-end platform, they were putting uniform, but the front-end modules that were catering for different markets, they were keeping the same. And I almost saw them just like as a shoulder fish, sort of going in the same direction, all with the same targets, with the same backbone to them. And I thought now a lot of corporates have woken up to say, we don't necessarily want to join this company right into and just consume them, a big fish swallowing a little fish. Actually, we'll make them part of the shoal and we'll take them with us in our wake, in our stream, but they will keep their identity and then we'll get more value out of them as we industrialize their product throughout.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Alexis, and I know that we will invite you again because,
Well, I hope I didn't bore everyone too much.
Thank you guys. Thanks everyone.